Alrighty, I do believe we are live. Thank you for joining me. Let's discuss. Let us get into this because this has been quite the hot topic on platforms like X. I don't know if it has. I have seen a couple of videos on YouTube from bigger creators who have delved into this and their own personal thoughts and impressions on this whole debate. But it seems to be largely confined to some rather vitriolic debates on X, and it's one of those issues that seems to be worsening the divide between men and women as opposed to improving it or making it better in any way. And that is one of my areas of concerns as a pagan. One of my motivations for exploring pagan spirituality is that there seemed to be a more organic and natural and complementary balance between the sexes, which that is something that I was very much looking for because these other religious frameworks, it felt unnatural to me, and of course, it felt unnatural because it was. So I'm not looking for to further the battle of the sexes. I don't like the idea that Uh, we have sides that are actively cultivating hostility for each other, and then we have others who are helping them do it because for there is a subsection of men who do seem to be actively hating on women, and you have some women, in order to gain favor with those men, pulling out the oldest trick in the book and saying, oh yes, I agree with you, and just backing up whatever they say. And we see it happen on the other side as well, and it's just not healthy. And I think it's past time we address this issue for what it is, and that we need to start de-emphasizing some of the loudest voices and start learning how to have more constructive discussions with one another. So that's where I'm coming from on this. And for the other thing before we get into it is I don't know what the motivation of this guy was when he was posting his before and after pictures, but I really doubt that his intention was to become the subject of a worldwide debate over what constitutes attractiveness for men. I don't think that was his intention at all. I don't see how he could fail to take anything that's being said about him personally, and I do feel badly about that because people should be able to post things without necessarily thinking they're going to become the center of this kind of attention. So my apologies to him. The reason why I'm doing this is because uh, the dam has already broke. Damage done. Nothing to do but try to pull something useful out of this. So a couple days ago, I saw this post come up, and the question on the table originally for this poll was, do you think this man looks better before or after? Apparently, he did a 12-week gym transformation. He was wanting to end up with a figure like this, and the poll asked, if you are a man, does he look better before, or man, do you think he looks better afterwards? And then for female, before or after, as people's opinions aligned. Now, I think it's worth pointing out and reminding everyone that in polls of this kind, it is completely anonymous. No one knows how you voted. It isn't even, people can't even tell if you have voted. So there's no reason for anyone to be lying or misrepresenting or doing anything else, kind of odd about it. There's no reason to suppose that people were expressing anything other than their actual opinions. And as you can see from the results, for the men folk, 43% of them say that he looks so much better after his 12-week gem blitz. And for women, 27% of us, well, and you have to remember these percentages, they're part of just one whole because it didn't let you break it up. But for the women, they said that they overwhelmingly, by 20 percentage points, preferred him before. And this has just unleashed a storm on Twitter. As you can see, if this Teoki person, which if you look into their account, you can see they're a bit of a pot stirrer. You'd never know if they're actually being honest about what they're presenting or not. But nevertheless, they brought this to the fire. They said, "Why are women lying about this? What's the actual cause?" Now, of course, that's going to cause a lot of objections as to the framing of it. The question wasn't why do women think this way or why are women perceiving him this way. It's why are they lying about it? So that we are intentionally being deceptive. That's a very strange thing to do, because for one, it puts women automatically on the defensive, and it puts men in this position of, "Yeah, why are you lying? We know you are." And and it is completely confusing the fact that women might have just been giving their honest opinion, and this is their honest preference, and that it wasn't any more complicated than that, and no one really expected to have this turn into a whirlwind. But here we are, because now we have to defend our honor and say, no, we are not lying. And that's absolutely what ultimately took place. There are so many different threads of women saying, we are not lying. This is why we prefer it. These are the vibes we're getting from the image. This is the impression we have of him. This is why we think he was actually better looking and honestly healthier than, his after. This is why. And men were not having any of it. They were refusing to accept our explanation about any of it, which is really pretty amazing because, first of all, we're talking about preferences. Preferences are extremely subjective. And if someone says, well, this is my preference, that's not, the next step in that conversation is, well, let me logically explain to you all the reasons why your preferences are irrational and don't make any sense. I mean, that just wouldn't happen in any other discussion. If someone said, "You know what? My favorite color, it's green. I think green is just the best color ever." The person they're talking to would not say, "Well, actually, the best color in the world is blue, and here's all the reasons why you're wrong. And aren't you ready to capitulate before my mastery of logic and how I've disproven and debunked your position that green is the best color?" It wouldn't happen. And I feel like this conversation, by trying to disprove that women like what they say they like, is it's very much in that vein. One thing that men seem to be bringing up in this conversation a lot is, well, what women say and what they do aren't exactly similar. And I'm thinking, are you sure you are comparing the same kinds of women? Because there are women who would prefer the second image, as evidenced by that percentage point, and I saw them making their case on Twitter about it. They were being honest. Why are they not being questioned? Why are they not saying, well, are you just telling men what they want to hear? Are you sure you're being truthful? Is that really your preference? They were not importuned like that. They were just kind of wrapped up in, like, see, even some of you are honest, some of you are willing to admit it, which all that means is that some women are, all it means is that they agreed with the men. That's all that it meant. It doesn't say anything beyond that. It's not actually getting into what the larger trends of what preferences are or why those preferences are. And so women began to explain, first making their case very logically, very rationally, and just men were not believing it, saying, oh no, this simply could not possibly be the case. And so, knowing that men are visual creatures, some helpful person brought up the picture of these ladies over here and said, okay, so, according to the original post, which I cut out just to have room on the presentation slide, it said that, most men would say that they would prefer the image of the young lady on the left and that they would not care and did not find the right attractive because she's too made up. They wouldn't think that it's an accurate representation of her features. And they said the vibe that the overly made up girl is giving you is the same vibe that the dude after his 12-week gemblance is giving to us. And they would not accept the logic. They wouldn't say that this is having the same psychological impact. It's been pretty wild. And hello, Brandy. She says he looks great either way. Kudos to him for having the deed to stick with the program and pursue his goal. Yeah, I'm not faulting him for sticking to his goal. The question isn't, what is he wanting to do with his body, which, of course, is his own affair. The question that was put to people, what do you prefer, the before or the after? And I'm looking at the before and the after, and the before, I have to admit, I side with the rest of my sex by and large. I think he does look overall more attractive. I think that if when I look at him, this is what I see. I see someone who is perfectly fit. I don't even think it's really fair to describe him as having a dad bod because clearly he's strong. Clearly he goes to the gym and he does his stuff, and he probably has a pretty active lifestyle. That's the overall impression I'm getting there. He's also smiling real big. He's exuding friendliness and openness. I mean, If I saw him in a dark alley, I would be more likely to assume that he would help me fight off an attacker rather than attacking me. He comes across as a good guy, probably has a dog, and being a woman of my age, if I had a daughter, say, 21, 22, and she brought him home saying, Mom, I met him out in the park. He was walking his dog. His dog lost his toy. I found it for them. We hit it off and we got to chatting. We've been going out, and now I want you to meet him. I would be rejoicing. I would be rejoicing because I'm like, oh, he sounds so nice. And look, he's going to give me beautiful grandbabies. This is a total win. He seems like he's living a pretty balanced lifestyle between work and his fitness and his hobbies, and I'd want to hear more about what kind of person he was. What is he interested in? What is his Roman Empire, type of thing. And that's really where I would go. But if I had a daughter that age and she brought him home after he became the second picture, I would honestly have some concerns because he's not giving me that same vibe. I'm not looking at him and thinking, oh yeah, I think he's really living a balanced lifestyle. I'm thinking, is he what is he trying to do with this? Because the first and let's talk about vibes a little bit, because in the first picture I'm seeing a dude who I think is just straight, uncomplicated. Just it's just a question of, is the girl he dating, is he compatible with her? The second picture, I would not expect to see him with a woman, because in the second picture, he's not giving me the vibes of someone who prefers the company of women. I would assume that he prefers the company of men, because he's just not. And also, it's the way that he's dressed. Because in the first picture, I mean, yeah, he's standing there with his shirt off, which isn't. I prefer for men to be invited to take their shirts off before they just fling themselves upon us half naked. But that's just me. But in the second one, he's wearing those short shorts, and I believe it's underwear. And again, can you wait for girls to ask to see you in your underwear before you post that to the world? That's all I'm saying. It bugs me. It really does. The way he's presenting himself. I mean, the pose. It strikes me as vanity. It looks like something hasn't changed within him internally that just is not really doing it for me. It's not giving me a good impression. I mean, I'm looking at him and I'm thinking it's not just a question of how many hours he's spending at the gym. I'm looking at it and I'm seeing, okay, are you one of those nut jobs who obsesses over every single aspect of his diet? Are you, we're measuring everything out by the gram? Are you taking supplements? What kind of supplements are they? Is your physique entirely the result of natural effort? It's just that it rises up a whole lot of questions that have nothing to do with what kind of person he is, merely concerned that maybe this isn't a good thing. Maybe there's something going on. Maybe he is seeking through whatever program he's on to maybe he's trying to fill a different hole. It just doesn't come across as being quite right. And Brandy, I promise I'm not ignoring you. She says, my first thought before versus after is the after photo makes me feel like I would have to put in many hours at the gym, which isn't my priority. Well, I think that's a valid concern. I think that does give the impression that it wouldn't be enough for him to be as turning this into a major aspect of his life. Because I mean, when men start looking at like that, it looks like they're going from work straight to the gym and then they sleep, and that there's nothing more to it. And the idea of a woman being with him, she would find herself also, well, first I'm at work, then I'm at the gym, then I'm collapsing into sleep, and there's not much else in my life besides obsessing over my diet. And I just don't think that most people want to live that way. I don't think that it's healthy to live that way. And it's adding yet another layer to this is bothering me. And it bothers me as much as, the young ladies on the other side of the picture, that men would prefer the one who is more natural, someone who's not made up, someone who they know where they stand with, as opposed to how she is next to her. It's that vibe. So then the discussion began to really deteriorate for people. And so they said, "Well, women just aren't looking at this properly. It's the lighting. Women are just too dumb to make allowances for the differences in the lighting and everything else. So what we'll do is we'll come up with a doctored image, and we'll try to even everything out." And so, and they tried to even out the lighting conditions. A lot of women were saying, "Oh gosh, he even looks shorter in the other picture," and so they tried to even out the height. But if you'll notice amongst this doctored image, for one, they didn't do the proper thing, which would be to, if you're going to doctor the image, at least have the decency to put him back in his gym shorts. No, they have both images of him in his underwear, which there were other women besides me saying, yeah, no, could we not? But they did it anyway. Another thing that they did is that they changed the expression on his face in the before. Look at this. In the original before, he's smiling broadly. He looks great. He's got a nice jawline. But in the altered one, they changed his hair. They made sure that he's not smiling. His chin is lifted at a weird kind of angle. He's not looking at us dead ahead. He's not looking us in the eye, so to speak. He looks listless and depressed and sad. And that's how they presented and decided to do their compare and contrast. I submit that this is an extraordinarily dishonest way to frame it, because they said, "Oh, well, now look at him. Now that we've evened it out and made everything exactly the same, because you two women were just too stupid to figure that out for yourselves." And I have tried to explain to people, I've had many conversations over the past couple of days, this isn't making the difference that you think that it makes. All that's telling me is that you're trying to reframe things and you're trying to manipulate women into giving you a different answer, proving some kind of point you think that you have. It's just a rather uh, more labor intensive attempt to say, oh no, women don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they like, so I'm going to change this all around and try to force them to say what I wanted them to say to begin with. And that is really the issue that I think is that we're getting to the crux to, is that in this day and age of social media, if people have their answers to their questions that they want to hear. And when someone is not giving that to them, especially if someone is making their case well, then they seek to manipulate, they seek to degrade the other person. They try to make it sound like they just don't know what they're talking about. And that is exactly what has happened in this instance. And of course, you know what the result is. I don't have to tell you. Everybody's mad. Everyone has a worse impression of each other than they did before. The Any kind of productive conversations have been very much in the minority. And there has been a real genuine lack of mutual understanding. And even in the commentator space, I've been rather horrified by the reactions of some of the commentators I've listened to. Some of them are men that I place a lot of value on their opinion. I found their analysis on a lot of issues going on in the present day to be quite valuable. But on this one, it was just insults to women for not telling them the answer that they want to hear. And us not telling them what they want to hear, this is going on simultaneously with accusations that we are dishonest, just inherently. Some were actually making the case that we are so inherently dishonest that we are incapable of being honest with men. It's really toxic stuff, really horrible and shocking to me. And to the men of that attitude, I would just like to say, well, given how you have treated the women who were giving you their honest opinions, and there were a lot of articulate, very thoughtful replies that were explaining that when women look at a man, we're not just seeing the physical, visual. Outside exterior of the man, we are picking up on great things about him through our intuition. We are reacting to him instinctively, and when our instinctive reaction is something you don't want to hear, wouldn't you prefer to know that? Assuming that you're a straight man and you're unattached and you would like to attract a woman, wouldn't you rather to have an accurate idea of where we actually stand, as opposed to this artificial standard that maybe other men are telling you that you need to reach, that women really don't find necessary? Because let's be real, especially if we're talking in terms of not just what you find to be initially attractive, but someone that you would actually want to get to know, potentially get to know well enough, progress in a relationship, potentially marry and have children with. If you're going into it with that mindset, you don't want someone whose entire world is wrapped up all in one thing. You don't want a dude who is his job, whatever that job is, and there's nothing that exists for him outside of that job. You don't want someone who is, his gym routine or his dietary routine with no other personality detectable outside of that. You don't want that. You want someone who's going to be a well-balanced human being that you can actually connect with, that would be make for a decent father in the event you had children with him. That's what women are looking at. We want someone with that personality. We want someone who shows that he knows how to balance his responsibilities at work with his hobbies, with his obligations to his existing family. Because if he can do those things, then he can probably also juggle uh, the responsibilities and pressures that come along with marriage and children. And it means that if he knows how to decide what to prioritize at what time in his life, that he's not going to be the one where you're saying, could you spend some time with the kids? I'm not saying you can't or shouldn't go lift weights and do these things you enjoy, but, could you spend some time with the kids since you're home from work? Could you do something with them? Could we have a conversation that isn't about your latest calorie count? Because, uh, no, no, I don't, I've heard enough about that to last a lifetime. We're not looking for someone who's doing this really extreme, weird lifestyle that has very little practical payoff. And that's really the whole point. When we look at this man, do we see a man who's living a full life, or do we see a man who's gotten into some kind of obsession? Because unless a man's profession is involved in some kind of bodybuilding or professional sports or anything of that kind, or even the military, in the military, especially depending upon how strenuous the job is, you need to have a certain physique so you can carry out those responsibilities. That's all fine. But if you are not needing that specifically for your profession, and you are in good health, you are in perfectly decent shape, there's nothing wrong with the way the before picture looks. Nothing wrong with it at all. My goodness gracious, he looks better than I would say 95% of the men I see walking down the sidewalk on the street where I live. He just looks better. So he has nothing to be ashamed of himself, nothing to feel insecure about, and no reason to suppose that he wouldn't be attractive or that he needs to make some kind of special physical effort. And I worry about where this insecurity is coming from. And I think part of the reaction that men are getting and why they're being so angry with women at this point is because they're thinking he had to work so hard and be so disciplined to get to his after. How dare these women not appreciate all his hard work? Well, it isn't a question about his hard work. And that was never the issue that was brought to our door to begin with. We were asked what we preferred. We answered. He didn't like the answer. And now apparently we're just at war until everyone forgets about this and finds a new controversy to go hate each other about. This isn't working. And again, as I said earlier in this, as a pagan, I am concerned about the dysfunction between men and women in society, whether it is occurring in their family relationships, with brothers and sisters or cousins or what have you, whether it's occurring within marriages, whether it's men and women being friends, men and women being able to deal with each other at the workplace, men and women just bumping into each other at the grocery store. The other sex is we are going to encounter them in any area of life that we're in. It's just the reality that exists. And so if we keep treating one another as enemies, and if we cannot hear what the other is saying, and if our first reaction to any kind of opinion we don't like is, oh, you don't, oh, you're dishonest, or oh, you just hate us, or oh, you don't appreciate what we're doing, if that's the first reaction, that's not the kind of train of thought that's going to lead to any place that's good. And this is just one example amongst many that you can find on Twitter and everywhere else of how these things go wrong. I mean, I can't imagine the gods sitting around and having some of the debates that we do. And if anything, owing to their age and experience, I think they would be much more inclined to think that different individuals have different preferences, and that isn't something that needs to be corrected. It just means that you need to have the right kind of people pairing up with one another. That's all. I think that's all that would amount to. I think if you were going to any of the gods or goddesses associated with romantic love, I think that would be more likely the focus of bringing you into the path of someone that you're going to be naturally compatible with. Just Doesn't it strike you as odd that there's always this constant need at conversion? I mean, and if you want to talk about, the legacy of Christianity and that overlay, I mean, I spend a lot of time on this channel, past and present, talking about how, and in many cases, underneath the veneer of Christianity, you're going to find something pagan underneath. But this need to convert, that is something that very much comes from the monotheistic world, and it's worth commenting on because, judging from the conversations I'm seeing, the goal of everyone involved is to browbeat the opposition into agreeing with you. I'm not even sure how many people are concerned with whether or not that agreement is genuine. I think they just want to have it on record that someone agrees and that they won. Well, if you are looking for victories in your interactions with other human beings as opposed to coming to greater understanding, you have already lost to begin with, and you have brought something really impure into the conversation. And in paganism, I have just found philosophically, whether we're looking at modern revivals or ancient practices, there just seems to be a little more tolerance for men and women to be themselves and a little more tolerance to let them go with their strengths and to have the courtesy to believe them when they express an opinion. That's just what I'm seeing. I can't speak to everyone's experience. I'm not going to say things are universal, but I will say that on Twitter, I noticed very few of our pagan brothers even weighing in on this issue. And those that did, they were not as inclined to be browbeating the women folk. One notable exception was Tom Roswell. You might know him as Survive the Jibe. His declaration was that women just don't know what they want. And I thought, well, you know, considering the attitude he sometimes displays in his work and in his dealings that I've seen between him and other people on Twitter, I'm not surprised that's what he came out with. And I'll just leave it there. But the point is, he's in the minority. Either they are leaving it well enough alone, which means our brothers have far better survival instincts than their non pagan counterparts, or they are coming to our defense and saying women like what they like, and they are expressing this preference. And yes, men might be reacting to what they think is the objective reality of his new physique, because I saw men bringing out charts and starting to talk about body fat and all this and that. I mean, they were trying to prove to us that it was better, and we were saying you cannot prove to us that it's better if we already like something else. This isn't something for you to disprove. And what really aggravated me is when I and other women were trying to explain to them, when we look at the man, we are also, responding to him intuitively. We cannot separate what we are seeing from what our intuition is telling us. It is one. It is part and parcel. It is absolutely the same thing for us. It is not compartmentalized. And saying that, oh, you just need to look at the external and not take anything else into account, that is literally asking us to cease having a female brain. That is literally asking us to stop being what we are, not just who we are, but what we are. And that isn't going to work. And it's really unreasonable for you to have that expectation. No woman that I saw was telling men that they could not prefer and think that the after picture was better. I did not see that argument made. If someone else did, I mean, let me know, but that is not what I witnessed. We just said, we like this other thing. Will you please stop browbeating us? Or impugning our motives, or saying that it's all a conspiracy. I mean, some men were arguing, saying, "Oh, well, if it's a soft dude, a girl thinks that she can be able to bend him to her will and manipulate him." And I thought, no woman with any sense at all wants a man who's just going to kowtow to her, looking for a partner in life, not a subordinate. Very few women have the mentality of I must remain perpetually in charge because that's the only way I will feel safe. We're not looking for that kind of control in a relationship. We want someone that we work with, that we work in tandem with. We are not looking for someone to dominate. That is not how we think. It just isn't. And and until we can have a little bit more of a wake up call about the differences and mentalities and the natural instincts between men and women, this is something that's going to continue. And I think that's why it matters so much for people who do speak about paganism publicly, to be honest about these differences between men and women and show that these are complementary differences and they work together. And aren't we all happier for it? And many of us are. In that, speaking of that, saw another conversation recently that was comparing divorce rates between different religions. And I'm happy to say that in the category that was, pagan, Wicca, Asatru, just kind of they jumble us all together as if we're the same thing, even though we definitely have our differences. Our divorce rate was lowest on that chart of any other religion. And I thought, clearly, we're doing something right. If we are making commitments and oaths, clearly, we are navigating those relationships with a little more aplomb than our counterparts in other religions, because otherwise, the statistics would bear that out. So I think that our sense of life as pagans, our philosophy, I think this is another example of how we have a great deal to offer about the world, and that if people not necessarily say, I'm going to abandon my religion, I'm going to take up my ancestral gods, and I'm going to be pagan now. That even if people don't find themselves moved to that point, if they just say, oh, they have a point, what they're saying is actually very sensible. That seems quite natural. I can agree with them on that. Having that little bit of influence, even if someone never changes their religion, I think it will benefit their lives because they're not going to come at it from this adversarial, someone must win. Someone has to have the only opinion, and all other opinions are subservient to that opinion. If we could get people out of that toxic mess, I just think that would just be better for humanity in general. And hello again, Brandy. She says more tolerance, perhaps. Tolerance would really help. Just allowing someone to be who they are is really the greatest gift that you can give them. And I'm not talking about, legitimizing someone who's doing some kind of weird degenerate thing that really shouldn't be normalized. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the normal differences between men and women, our normal things we gravitate to. If we had more tolerance for that, made room for that, we would all be better off. Husband unit and I, we're both a little bit introverted, so both of us kind of do need our time away from each other. And one of the things we'll tell each other from time to time is, how can I miss you if you never go away? And it's not because we don't enjoy one another's company. It's just because sometimes we need time to recharge and engage in interests and activities that are just of interest to ourselves and not really of interest to the other person, because it helps us recharge. We allow each other that space. We are tolerant of one another's differences. And because we allow that, that means that when he's perhaps less emotional than what I think is really fitting for something that's going on, I'm making room for that is his natural zone. That is where he is happy. That is where he is healthy. Something would be wrong if he was not reacting the way that he would. And it thus allows him, because he has time away from me, to exercise tolerance for my more impassioned responses about things, or my whole, this something must be done about this immediately tendencies. He's more tolerant of that because he's been allowed the opportunity to recharge. And when I look on social media platforms, I'm not seeing tolerance. I'm not seeing any kind of embracing. I'm not seeing anything that's going to solve any kind of problems. And at a certain point, I think we need to address, especially the influencers who are encouraging the divide. I think we need to start addressing the issue of just how much of a menace to society those people are, particularly the ones who have enough influence that they are profiting from it. They get, checks from X for their content, or they're monetized on YouTube, or they have some kind of subscription base. I think we really need to take a look at these people and say, uh, we do have an issue with you. And I don't think you should be getting paid for, hastening the destruction of our society, or bringing us to a much more critical juncture than we're already at. You should not be getting rewarded for making things worse. And and this isn't something that I'm just talking about as a pagan. Yesterday, also on Twitter, there was a big to do in the Christian circles because a lady, she got a job as an editor for some kind of Christian book company or church, something or other of that. And there was this man also claiming to be Christian who said how terrible this was, and how she should be raising the children at home and not interfering in the men's work, and all this and that. I mean, and And people were just flabbergasted by his view, saying, "What are you talking about? How is that threatening the church structure or any of our beliefs?" So every corner of society we look, we're seeing people who are at odds with the opposite sex and have major issues with them. And we have everyone else saying, "This is crazy. This is not sustainable. We do not need to have this kind of problems encouraged anymore." And I'm hoping that we are beginning to see the tide turn. And I think by being open about our beliefs and our experiences and how just living a pagan life, how that has had such a beneficial effect on our own relationships, I think that can be us adding our own strength to that turning tide, so that hopefully we're no longer having these ridiculous debates over whether or not men and women are allowed to have different preferences when it comes to matters of physique. So that's my 2 cents. I needed to get that out of my system because it was just making me crazy. The pathetic level on which this discussion has been taking place, the intolerance of it, and just the demonization. I've always had difficulties with other women. I've always had problems with relationships with them. Started with my mother, whole other story. The point is, I'm not someone who's always making excuses for my own sex. I'm happy to call us out if I think there's an issue. But this unmitigated hatred of women on basic principle and saying you must not contradict us ever, you have to agree, otherwise you are wrong, and we're going to be hateful to you about it. That's just not on. That's not what I signed up for. That's not something that's going to rebalance things between the sexes, and it certainly is not making men any more attractive to women. So, thank you for listening to me rant and rave. I appreciate it. Let me know what you think in the comments below, if you even want to weigh in. This was I just needed to rant and rave for a little bit. Um, Beyond that, today I need to redo the altar for Beltane. I need to start recording videos for May. Got stuff to do, but had to get the poison out of my system. So thank you for listening. But I'll let you guys get back to what you were doing. Bye for now.